Hello and welcome back to the course Private Pilot Maneuvers. Today we'll talk about spin awareness. Now, why is this lesson not called spins? During normal training to become a private pilot, actually spinning an airplane is not included. In normal training aircraft, it's also not allowed. They're not certified to spin, most of them. During a normal private pilot's course, we can only talk about the awareness and how to avoid spins. But having said that, I really recommend, if you can, during your training, to find an instructor and a spin-approved airplane and try it out to really spin an aircraft and try the recovery by yourself, because you will be surprised. That's all I could say. Learning the recovery template and having it in your head is the one thing. That's okay, but if you really only use this know this in theory, and then during your real flying at some point unintentionally you get into the first spin of your life and you need to apply this, that's a different story. So it helps a lot if you have actually really done it once. But it's important, of course, to get an airplane that is certified for it and an instructor that's certified for that. Okay, now after we've talked about stalls in the last lesson, it's important to talk about spins right now, because spins are very dangerous, even more so than a normal stall, because there's much more altitude loss involved. A spin can be very disorienting, so in general, recovery is harder and takes a lot more space in terms of altitude. So it's really essential that you know the correct recovery procedures according to the actual airplane that you're flying. But as we will see in a minute, there's actually a template for recovery that fits most airplanes. Now, what's the spin in the first place? It's actually a kind of stall. It's an aggravated stall, if you will. And it's occurring actually out of a full stall with an additional component of yaw, which can be the result of bad coordination, as we've talked about in the turning lessons. Can be the result of a deliberate yaw action, of course, if you intentionally want to spin, for example, in an aerobatic airplane. So to illustrate this is how do you enter an intentional spin, is actually pull the nose up until the airplane stalls, and when it stalls, you actually apply full rudder in the desired spinning direction, and then this yaw will then make the stalled airplane start to spin. So you have a stall and a yawing action that will have the airplane spin. That's why it's so important to always coordinate your turns. And then when the airplane has entered a spin, it will follow this downward corkscrew path. So not like in a spiral dive, will rotate around this longitudinal axis, but around this corkscrew path, as you can see in the picture. This yaw I was talking about for entry into the spin can be caused by the pilot. However, it can also be caused by adverse yaw, propeller effects, or even wind shear. So modern airplanes, especially training airplanes, are reluctant to enter a spin, so they're pretty docile. But this can be different in different airplanes, so just be aware of that. Also refer to the pilot's operating handbook for the exact spin recovery procedure for your airplane, because the template that we'll discuss now might not fully fit. For example, I'm flying one airplane where the spin procedure, according to the pilot's operating handbook, is to activate the rescue system. So this airplane is actually equipped with a parachute, ballistic parachute, and the handbook says spin recovery is obviously pretty tricky in this airplane. So if you really enter a spin, you should pull the emergency chute. So this is, of course, something you need to know. Now, there are 4 phases in a spin. There's the entry phase, the incipient phase, the fully developed phase, and the recovery phase. Now, in the entry phase, if you enter it intentionally, as I've said before, you stall the airplane and apply rudder, and you keep then the full back elevator, and then the airplane will enter a spin. Or maybe not, if you do it correctly, and the airplane is prone to enter a spin easily. Then in the incipient stage, first of all, in the incipient stage, this is normally the first 2 revolutions. This is where actually recovery should take place at the latest. The aerodynamic forces have not achieved a balance really. The airspeed will stabilize during this phase at some rather low level. And then follows the developed phase, where all the aerodynamic forces are now in balance. Also the rotation rate, the airspeed, and the vertical speed will have stabilized. In contrast, for example, to a spiral dive, where the airspeed will increase actually constantly. And then there's the recovery phase. And the recovery phase is completed when actually the rotation has ceased and the air angle of attack has reduced below the critical angle. Now, this is the template for stall recovery, so to speak, that fits many airplanes, but again, check your handbook. Normally, the flaps, if they're extended, should be retracted, but of course that's not the most important part of it. What's required is that you normally apply forward pressure to reduce the angle of attack, just like in a stall, that you keep the ailerons level, so neutral, and apply rudder in the direction against the rotation direction, then to reduce the power to idle. Now, applying aileron is bad, because if you apply aileron into the spin, then the rotation rate will be accelerated, the stall will be steepened, and if you apply aileron opposite to turning rotation, then this will flatten the spin attitude and it will delay recovery. Also, of course, you need to push the elevator, because you need to break the critical angle of attack, so you need to reduce the angle of attack below the critical angle of attack. Be careful after the recovery not to apply back pressure too quickly again, because then you can enter a second spin. The same goes for the rudder. So you apply full rudder in the opposite of the rotation direction, and then after recovery, be sure not to apply excessive opposite rudder then, because then you can easily enter a spin in the other direction. So I've been trying this, so I actually went out with an instructor to do some actual spin training, and I've seen some very interesting points that I would like to tell you about. First of all, these things really happen. For example, it happened to me that after the recovery, I inadvertently applied opposite rudder, and then the airplane wanted to enter a spin in the other direction. Furthermore, I knew that I needed to keep the ailerons neutral, but inadvertently, and only my instructor told me, because I didn't notice, I did apply some aileron actually during the recovery, which is normally a bad idea. So if you don't get out of the spin, really consciously check your control positions, because maybe inadvertently, without knowing, you have applied some aileron. So most important part, lower the nose. So I keep the elevator neutral, or apply a bit of forward pressure according to your pilot's operating handbook. Normally it's positive forward pressure you need. Reduce the power to idle, keep the ailerons neutral, and apply full rudder against the turning direction. Retract the flaps if they are extended. And then when the spin rotation stops, neutralize the rudder and then apply back pressure as required again to return to normal flight. It's also very important, not only in a general way, but also for if you inadvertently enter a spin, that your CG, your center of gravity, is within limits. Because, for example, having a CG aft of the limit, aft of the aft limit, this will then create the conditions if you enter spin for a flat spin, which can be really hard to recover from. There have been cases where pilots reported the normal recovery template just didn't work, so they apply in their despair. They tried every control combination they just could, and eventually they came out of it, but don't really know how. So depending on the case, it might even be true that you need aileron into the turning direction to actually get out of a flat spin. So a flat spin is really dangerous because the normal stall recovery might not work anymore. Okay, so this is something really important. At the very least, learn this stall recovery as it's described in your pilot's operating handbook, and you should really be able to do this and recite this in your sleep. And then, which would be far better, also find an instructor and a spin-approved airplane and really try it, because you will be surprised of how many things you can actually do wrong. All right, so this concludes the lesson about spin awareness. As with stalls, the most important thing and your best safeguard against the dangers of spinning is just to avoid it. Don't let the situation develop into a spin. Okay, this concludes the briefing about spin awareness. Thanks for watching and see you next time.